we're going live now. All right, and we are live. Hey everyone, welcome to the stream. Sorry for the delay. We had some technical difficulties to say the least right here, but we're going to go ahead and get started right now. Thanks for joining. I'm sorry for the delay again. So, hey everyone, Watzon here, and welcome to Talking Tech with Watzon, episode 1. Obviously, this is a brand new thing, so let's go over briefly what this podcast is all about. The basic idea is to do interviews with makers, creators, and influencers from around the world, figure out what makes them tick, and hopefully, if we're lucky, learn the secret to success in this new technological age. Roll intro. All right, guys. So for this first episode, we have here Vicente from Valencia, Spain. How's it going, Vicente?
Hi, I'm great. And you?
Hey, I'm doing pretty great myself. All right, so we are getting confirmation in the chat that all sounds good and the picture is great. So that is good to hear. Wish I would have gotten that confirmation before. So for those that have been sitting waiting, we've actually gone through a good portion of the interview, and then I realized I wasn't streaming. So great start, great start. so
I'm
like I
not sure
said.
it's streaming now because I can't see it, but
Yeah, F's
just to
in
be
chat,
sure.
everyone. Let's oh boy. Well, at least we're live now, so let's go ahead and get started. But before we do, I want to make sure that everyone in the chat knows to go ahead and drop questions along the way if you have any. At the end, we'll be taking viewer questions, and let's go ahead and get started. So, Vicente, how long have you been in software development? That is my first question. Let's get started with that.
Okay. I started when I was 14 years old, and now I'm 27 years old, so I think it's around 13 years or something like
13
that,
years. Yeah.
more
All right.
or less.
Yeah, and what made you want to become a developer in the first place?
Well, we used to play a game that it was very, very addictive, and it was some kind of MMORPG. And it was a very, very simple game that it was 2D, and we were very, very interested on it, on making our own server and our own mod. And we discovered that that game actually was open source. So we started investigating, and then we started programming, and then we did our own mods. And I don't know, we found a community behind it that it was really great. And I don't know, that's the very beginning of what I started to do with games.
That's awesome. So chalk another one up to A, the open source community, and B, video games. But they're
Yeah.
dangerous, right? uh, yeah, video gaming is kind of what got me started as well. Come to think of it, so like I didn't actually end up getting into game development. I tried, but I just found that I don't know. I didn't really have the right mind for it. I feel like video games specifically, especially when you're going lower level with the actual engine and stuff, takes a lot of
It's
math,
very complex. Yeah.
and yeah, it's very complicated. And I personally started out with web development, and that's basically what I've been doing for the past 11 or 12 years. So, uh, but that's awesome. And what did you say the name of that game was?
The game is called Argentum Online, but
Argentum
I'm not
Online.
sure how is it called in English because it was a LATAM game.
Right.
But I can put later on the links there, and other projects that I did related to it.
Yeah, that would be awesome. Yeah, the comments section will be open for that for sure. So what was your first programming language? You got started with game development. What languages did that lead you to?
Well, it it is a bit strange because with game development usually it's C and C++, but
Right.
that small game that we used to play was coded in Visual Basic 6.
Yeesh.
So I started learning with that language, and after 2 years or so, I did my first game engine in Visual Basic 6, and then I moved to C and C++ and other things that I mean because I feel that it was very limited when I discover more things. So I moved them to C and C++, and then I stick to it until now.
Right. Yeah. No, I totally get it. I experimented with a little bit with Visual Basic back in the day, and why people still use it is a mystery to me. I see people pop up in Telegram every now and then asking like how to develop Telegram bots using Visual Basic, and I'm like,
Yeah,
why?
at least it was cool,
Just why?
It had a visual editor where you
Right.
can put the
Hmm.
buttons and everything. So
I
it
think
will
that
be cool
that
to
was the
have
big
some.
draw to
Yeah,
it, was that
yeah,
visual editor. Uh, well, that's awesome though. Everyone's got to start somewhere, right? And you moved on from Visual Basic to C and C++, and those. I mean, for how old they are, they're still very common, very popular, and very well used, especially in game development and stuff, because performance matters. So
yeah.
that's awesome. So the reason why uh, we scheduled this interview to begin with was to talk about a project that you have been working on called Metacall, and I know like we've talked a bit about it, and that's kind of what led me to want to do this interview because I think it's really cool. But why don't you tell us what Metacall is? What is it all about?
Okay, Metacall is various things, but mainly it is a polyglot or multi-runtime, which allows you to mix multiple languages in the same program and build a program or system mixing languages or use libraries from other languages in your own language transparently. And a part of this, we are building a FAS or function as a service with this runtime. So you can build web pages or any internet service with multiple languages. And that's more or less the idea behind this.
Okay, so from what I understand, it's basically like it's kind of taking the whole serverless microservice type architecture to a new level, where instead of having multiple little servers, each running in different languages, communicating over, REST, JSON, RPC, God forbid, SOAP, uh, you've got all of these languages working together with a common runtime where
Exactly.
they're communicating in between each other, and you can use them. That's pretty dang cool.
Exactly. That's the idea because after many years developing distributed systems, I noticed that every language has its own way of communicating. There are many different ways of doing things, and you write a lot of boilerplate in order to create just a few functionality, and then I thought maybe we could just import a library, and maybe that library you don't care if it is in another language, or maybe if it is in another server. So you will be working as if you were writing a monolith, but in fact, and behind the scenes, it is like a distributed system. So that's the main idea: keep the best things of monolith development, but in fact create distributed systems without noticing, with transparently.
Right, exactly, because you've still got the ability to clump all the code together. You can have them share a common code base, or
Exactly.
if you want to, you can always also divide them up among multiple GitHub repositories or whatever you want to do. But you can still work with different languages and just connect them all together. I'm very used to with languages like Crystal and Zig. Those are to newer languages that I really like, they have a really good foreign function interface for interfacing
Yeah,
with C, and that makes it really easy to use C libraries inside of that language. So I can only imagine how much nicer it would be if you could also have a foreign function interface with JavaScript and Python and Ruby and
exactly.
all these other languages. Like that
Exactly.
is amazing. And we've got a comment in the chat here saying, "Yes, we need a project like this." I totally agree. I don't know why no one has thought of doing this before. Uh so that
There is
that
there is some people that have done some projects similar like GraalVM,
uh-huh. Right.
but GraalVM is more focused on compiling Java into a native image, but they also have the polyglot, and Metacall is focused only on the polyglot.
Gotcha. And doesn't now I don't know very much about GraalVM, but doesn't it's still a virtual machine itself that requires like code to compile to it, right? To its bytecode, or is it not?
I think it generates a binary which tries to remove as much as possible the virtual machine, and it has very high compilation times. But I think they are doing a great work and they are trying to reduce that. But still, for example, Metacall doesn't have a compiler infrastructure yet, although maybe in the future we will look for WebAssembly and things like that. But at this moment, our idea is to stick to the current runtimes because they are already tested. We know that they work, and we don't want to re-implement all in which is from scratch.
Right. The idea is to be the glue that connects languages together rather
Exactly.
than trying to extend beyond that and be a whole compiler, editor
Exactly.
ecosystem type. Okay, that
It's
makes
still
sense.
very effective. I think it's still very effective because you need both. You need the compiler and you need the runtime.
Hmm.
And with the runtime, you can already do many things. Like for example, um, um, changing the calls by RPC, or I don't know. You can do many things like auto trading or things like that that sound really crazy, but it's possible to do them.
Right. Okay. So that begs the question: what was the inspiration behind Metacall? What led you to developing? I know, like you talked about game development, and so I assume that
Yeah.
had something to do with it.
So we started with that game in Visual Basic 6, and then I got really motivated by game engines. So I started to build my own game engines from scratch. So I built a game engine in Visual Basic 6, and then I moved to C and C++. And at some point, we had a very big project of a game engine of MMORPG, and we were many people, scripters, game design, modelers, animators, and at some point we had many developers, for example JavaScript developers, that they wanted to develop on the project and, for example, do the game logic of the game, but the project was written in C and C++, so it was very difficult for them to start with it. So I was thinking, how can I move this or simplify this to that developer so they can work with Java on top of the game engine. So like many other games like Unity or game engines like Unity or Unreal, and they always have a scripting language. So I decided to do the same, no? To implement that scripting language on top of the game engine, and then it will be great because we will have many developers on top of it. But meanwhile, as I was developing it, I discovered that maybe it was possible to not just to mix C and C++ and JavaScript, but to make some kind of abstraction of that idea that could mix many languages at the same time. And then I did a small proof of concept mixing Python and JavaScript, and it worked. So I thought, sadly, maybe I have to abandon this 6 years old project of a game engine, but I have to start this new project, a part of it. I have to do I have to do this from scratch, and maybe, I don't know, but maybe create new things that are better than the current project that I am doing right now. So we started with it, and after 1 year of development, we have a very cool version of it that it was between on a not the stable yet, but it was already usable. And then we thought, maybe if we put this inside of a server, what would happen? What would happen if we put this polyglot inside of a server? And then Metacall was born.
Right. It's always painful when you've got to when you feel like it's best to abandon a project that you've put so much time and effort into, but you have this other idea that's just so much better. I'm glad you did. What you came up with was probably better than any other game engine could have been.
Yeah.
I think that this was definitely the right path to go down. Uh, so, what do you envision for the future of Metacall then?
Well, we think that nowadays the cloud is growing a lot in terms of complexity. For example, you have nowadays Kubernetes, which is a great tool, but it's really complex to handle, to manage. And we think that Kubernetes will never die, but we need more abstractions on top of that layer, because it's very difficult to developers to think about all those aspects of distributed systems nowadays. Because at the end, the developer only wants to do the business logic. They don't want to care about the scalability, plumbing, DevOps, and all that things. So our idea is to create a cloud where everything got simplified as much as possible, and people from very junior profiles can build systems, distributed systems as senior, like if they were a senior, but maintaining that simplicity, like developing a monolith, but with scalability and all those kinds of things that you have nowadays, like service mesh and that all things that we have nowadays.
Right.
So more or less, that's our idea. I don't know. Maybe in the future it will change. We don't know. The technology is very difficult to predict.
Right, of course. Yeah, you never know what's going to happen next year, let alone in the next five. Uh, so the last question that I have is, as I mentioned when I asked initially, what is Metacall? This is an amazing idea. I don't know why no one has quite done something like this before. You mentioned that like GraalVM is in somewhat of a similar vein, but I mean that's one project. I'm wondering what hangups have you run into? Like what problems have you had along the way, or have there really not been any? Like what has this been kind of smooth sailing?
I don't know. I probably there aren't projects like that, because it's like um, it's a very difficult project to implement. It's like doing
Oh yeah,
a game engine. It's very difficult to implement a project like this, because each language is designed with some restrictions or some design decisions, and other languages have other design decisions. For example, some languages are based on functional and others are object oriented. So mixing both, it's like connecting things that doesn't work fine. I mean, doesn't work easily together. So I don't know. I think it's a good idea, and probably people will use it if they discover how fast you can develop with this. Because we have started to develop Metacall itself with Metacall. We
Right.
have started to develop Metacall, and we speed up our developing time. So I think people, when they saw that they can work faster, and for example, companies that have um, software companies that have different developers, and for example you have 10 Ruby developers and you finish some Ruby project and you don't have anything more to work, you can put those 10 Ruby developers in a Node.js project and keep them working together. And I'm sure many people will be against this kind of idea, but at the end you are just reusing code. If the code is well writing, and it's not spaghetti, you can mix it, like if it's another library.
Yeah, that makes
But we
complete
will see.
sense.
We will
Well,
see.
yeah, that's I can't tell you how excited the this project makes me though. Like the ever since I first heard about it, I was like, that's amazing. I want to use that. And so I really hope that other people feel that way as well. So I'm going to start taking viewer questions now, if that's all right.
Okay.
We got two in here so far. So anyone else that's watching, if you have any questions, go ahead and ask them. Anymoose asked, could Vicente elaborate on the business model a bit? So could you talk a little bit more about your FAS, the function as a service, and how
Okay.
you plan for that to work?
Okay. We have started with three plans. That is, it's like if you buy a BPS, because our idea is to make it pay as you go, like most of serverless services. But at the beginning it was too complex, so we decided to put it there. So we have three plans. I think it will be enough for most of cases. We also have, you can contact us if you are a company and for example you want half of the cluster, we can sell it to you too. But the idea is to sell that. Well, it's fast, and now it's also a CaaS. It's like a container as a service, because you can host pure functions, but you can also host servers. You can put an Express server there, and it will work. And the idea of maintaining Metacall as a polyglot is to sell it in the fast. That's our idea. That's our model of
That's
business
awesome.
model.
Yeah. Okay. And I don't know if this was a joke question or what, but I'm gonna ask it anyway. Trinix Jetix asked, "How much spaghetti is there in Metacall?"
Well, well, that's a nice question, because before starting medical, I used to develop in a very rigorous way. So all my game engines were always focused on maximum performance, the best design. The whole design was to be documented and well written. I mean, it had to be 10 of 10. But when I started Metacall, my mind changed, because we thought this should be something like a business rather than a perfect technological project. So at some point I decided to stop being so purist and focus on I mean, throwing releases as fast as possible. So
Gotcha.
we designed the core of Metacall in the best way we could, but then each language can be implemented as plugins. I mean, you can put new languages into Metacall as plugins. So those plugins are most of them are like spaghetti, because I mean, I wrote them as fast as possible in order to embed the language, and that's it. So we try to maintain the core of the polyglot, more or less well writing, and the API is well documented, and well writing, but the internal part of the polyglot is a bit of a spaghetti at some point. But at least it's a plugin that you can rewrite whenever you want, and it's not coupled to the core, at least.
No,
So
that makes sense. So the idea is that instead of trying to do something perfectly, something that might never come out
and
otherwise,
yeah,
you're working on getting features implemented, getting languages integrated, and getting it out there, and
yeah,
then you can deal with bugs later along the way. But the idea is to get it out there quickly.
exactly. At
Gotcha.
least we have extensive testing that it will allow in the future to refactor it. So I don't fear it. It's at
Well,
least
right.
it's well isolated.
And Metacall itself is open source as well, correct?
Yeah,
So,
you can check
so
it.
people can always go in and submit pull requests and fix bugs.
Exactly.
Animos again is asking, sounds good, plus one customer. Where do I sign up? You can go into the video description. There is a link to metacall.io, and you should be able to sign up there. So, if there's no other questions for right now, that's all I had. Thank you so much for joining me, Vicente. This
Okay.
it's been a long time coming. We've been trying to get this going for a little bit now, and I'm glad we finally did. Thank you for
Yeah,
being
me too.
the first person on Talking Tech with Watzon.
Okay.
We do have one more question. So this is the last question that I'm going to take, and then we're going to close here. They want to know like how much overhead
Okay.
it adds with that the Metacall runtime.
We have some tests in the repository which compare, for example, Python C API, which is, for example, loading a function into a Python function and then calling them from C. And we have the same benchmark, but with Metacall, which is calling from and with Metacall interface to that Python function. And I think it adds a 15% uh, of penalty in comparison to the Python C API. And then I can compare easily to other APIs because, for example, Node.js, it doesn't have, it has starting to have a good embedding API now on the 14 version, but before that, it hasn't got embedding API, and the same happens in Netcore. So, I mean, it's difficult to know the comparison because really it's impossible. I mean, it was impossible to embed, for example, Node.js or Netcore easily. So
That makes sense.
I don't know.
So more testing needs to be done if you can
Yeah,
figure out the best way to benchmark things, but overall it's pretty difficult. And I understand how that goes. I know how difficult it is to come up with benchmarks even for simpler projects, and this is by no means simple.
we treat we. I mean, I try to apply. I all I have learned from Wyman engines and performance into this. So the idea is to keep it. I mean, even if it is really usable or it seems easy to use, we try to keep it performant and efficient, and you know
No, of
as much as
course.
we can.
Of course. All right. Well, we're going to go ahead and end it there. Thank you again, Vicente, for joining, for being the first person, and for going through the growing pains with me, trying to deal with this and get the stream up and running. I'm glad you did. I really appreciate it. I know it's late there, so go get some sleep. But thank you again for joining. Signing
Thank
off,
you so much
guys.
for the opportunity too.
Thank you. And thank you, everyone, for joining. And we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye bye.